Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. I wanted to speak about a concept that if I feel I speak about it and it's heard, then I feel whatever happens in this lifetime of mine, I'll feel assured on some level. From the void of non existence, existence stepped out. As the journey of conscious attention began, the sophistication of this has brought us to a civilization that I find the saviors of, regardless of what path our species goes, regardless of when it will be extinct. I find that the universe was an unconscious phenomenology. It became conscious. It has become conscious to a point where the ape has lifted up not just from the ground, but from its connectivity to the world. Our separation was our independence, strangely. Man's separation from nature. I feel that the purpose of all human beings is strangely built in the design of their existence. And what we find is a civilization that from the darkness, from the unconscious, it has become conscious. This civilization of ours is a lighthouse of a unique movement of intelligence in this universal sector. And so, what can a being do that is conscious of design? It can become, in some sense, a great designer. And I feel civilization's hope is in its ability to be remodeled differently, not in it completely being destroyed or errors are go unseen. Humanity, every human being, we are all great designers of a conscious civilization. And in our unconscious, there is no civilization. You can think of it as animalistic anarchy. We are too savage to communicate. Therefore, communication stops. That's a potential. But the reality is that if the person is introduced to a gentler realm where it's more rewarding, then in some sense the person may calm down. Sometimes it's like strangely, some people you have to communicate with their heart first, and some people you have to communicate to their mind first, to their intellect. Pretty much unconscious movement of nature, this movement of nature became conscious of itself. When it became conscious of itself, that was an awareness to a separation of our limbs and the world. So the development of limbs was the most extraterrestrial thing, I think. It's like you can't look at a jellyfish and feel like It's completely earthly, But I'll tell you this, like, um, as the I find that in the evolutionary process, the creature became aware of itself again, physically separate. That was the, you can say, ignition of the objective evolution. I find after it had endured for a while as just being this moving creature on the surface of the earth, then it began to lift up again, and in that second lift up, it was a subjective evolution began. So, in other words, the creature became aware that it's a creature. First, it wasn't, it was aware of the world, but it wasn't aware that it itself is a creature. Then it became aware it is a creature. And the moment it became aware it is a creature, it accessed what I call the subjective realm. And so that's why we all have these unique imaginations in place. To be a member of a conscious civilization means to not only be allowed, but the members of the civilization must allow the freedom of, how can I tell you? It's like the overall value um, must be given a freedom. It's a strange idea, but it's like the freedom of a nation from its archetype, or the freedom. You see, the world is put into a lot of subjective boxes, but ultimately there is a rawness to experience. Now I'll get to that. The whole point is that I'm pretty much realizing the concept of being conscious of design. Like I wanted to, in this talk, take more of an approach of how my eyes have perceived an artistic dimension. Sorry about that. Just a quick phone call. Uh, Pretty much, guys, just this idea that our eyes have opened up to existential design and we're experiencing it in multidimensional ways, and to become responsible for the phenomenology of the body and all that means that you're trying to actually experience yourself as your whole moment. So, what that means is your mind is like the sky, you can't see its edges, but the body you can see, it's like the earth, you can see it. And so this relationship with man and mind is very unique, because it's as if when you look at evolution, you're like, oh my God, did it take like was the point of 4 billion years of evolutions for man to be confused to know whether he's a thought or not? Like, you see what I mean? Evolution was a way of an object becoming a subject to itself. Or we can say evolution so far. I personally feel it's even moving beyond the subjective route. But when I say great designers, I mean that it's like, you see, many people see reality and then they filter it through certain values and then they act. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just to wonder about the speed of advancement of a civilization is the next stage. Next stage. What that means is first stage, all right, the creatures on the rock are aware that they're all creatures on a rock. They begin having a kind of collective ethos. Then what happens after we have the narrative, after we have a kind of foundational vision for humanity, then it's as if like we can set up the pillars. And what that means is, in some sense, the next question after first establishing the identity, the collective identity of a species, then becomes how to accelerate that. That means we don't want to just be an advanced civilization, we want to be at the edge of it. So for me, it's as if imagine like Napoleon, not Napoleon, but somebody with a Napoleon psychology just coming out and being like, advance all technologies at full speed, like he's shouting, and every person in the civilization endlessly becomes technological, for example. It's a suggestion that we realize you can't hold on to the past. Life is not designed that way. And you really can't hold on to the present because the present changes. And you look at the future and you see that the future is only what's coming. So ultimately, it's like even if we forgot about time, it would just be eyes opening, closing, opening, closing. And in this opening and closing, when they are open, they have access to a civilization and the history of the earth. When they are closed, they are dancing in the inner realm, or the void. You have returned to the void. There's some beings who there's no such thing as enlightenment for them. They just no longer are a concept in a dualistic realm. It's kind of hilarious. It's like they go out of body, maha samadhi, not out of their physical body but out of their subjective conceptual lineage. And that's another way of saying the being is moving outside of the memory field. There are certain memory fields, so this is strange, but it's like the same way how an astronaut, you can say, the more further it goes from the Earth, the more it will reminisce. The more it will wonder. The astronaut that's been in space for a while, the more that astronaut is thinking what's happening on Earth. You see, so I playfully kind of saw this notion that it's as if there are fields. It's as if every atmospheric level of the planet that imagine playfully the rocket ship of the astronaut is going, the reminiscence, that urge of home is kind of, there's more distancing arising from that. On some level, it's kind of hilarious. Even in secular circles, we see even scientific vision. You see, it's energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can just change. That's why we have, for example, potential energy becoming kinetic. Something being still and then suddenly moving. You know, so we see that if energy cannot be created or destroyed, that's another way of saying what is consciousness at its core is undestroyable. And the idea of a soul is like consciousness plus energy that's conscious of itself. And if energy is being defined, it can't be created and destroyed. That's the closest way. We can, because on some level, life is just it's just phenomenology, and then this phenomenology, based on its sophistication, begins assuming spheres of reality, and it begins moving. What that means is this may sound hilarious, but every living human being in society is in a sort of, they are performing in their mind sphere. So what that means is every person is seeing world through their own eyes first. If they're not attentive to their own eyes, they will block out the world. This is why it's like it's easier to be rude to someone you don't know, or someone you don't like, for example. It's an automatic justification in the person's mind to, like, okay, I don't like this person, I'm gonna, communicate this dislike. But I think the more superior stance is that language comes and goes, and people are never just their thoughts. The thought is a fragment of a certain, it's like a teardrop of uh, the eyes of their experience. It's not their eyes. So this idea that civilization has reached a point that it needs great designers, and a great designer is a consciousness that's aware of design. And so when you're aware of design, I feel that gives you a strange ability, but there is a strange downside to it, which I'm still exploring at the moment. That means I don't have too many firm opinions on this, but I think that there is something about the subjective realms that if a person, like, what are the options? The options are it's just matter is the only thing that's worth looking at, or there is something beyond matter worth looking at, or there's nothing to look at. These seem to be the three options, you know. And so I've kind of realized, if civilization, the idea for it is that it can evolve, it's kind of like we can say the concept of a civilization evolving is the collective, the greatest collective evolutionary effort. That means imagine each human being on this planet suddenly it was forced by law for every human being to become a genius. Imagine, and what does that mean? That means every person should find ways of kind of connecting worlds in new ways. You see, it's. Let me tell you what it is. It's like it's spheres of language. I call it. It's like bubbles of language. Like right now as I'm speaking to you, it's as if sound is animating and somehow, what's the term? Evoking image in your mind. Like when somebody like Sadhguru, this yogi, he said, the content of your mind is not your choice. That means if somebody comes up to you and says apple, you're gonna see, like the sound of it can put, like most likely an image of an apple will arise, right? So the content of your mind is not your choice because it's scanning the area. And when we really look at more of a sophisticated conscious choice, it's a consciousness that is aware of the unconscious. That means it recognizes its boundary. And so when you, for example, look at the Abrahamic context of what was wisdom, wisdom inevitably came down to fear of God. So I'm telling you, century, the greatest wisdom was to realize that there's something more administering this. So ultimately, the notion that there is an invisible mover made the visible mover feel irresponsible. So the irritability of the physical mover was kind of put on the subjective invisible mover. So what I'm saying is that after object worship, human beings were worshiping objects. What do you think they moved on after the object was slapped out of their hand? They moved on to subject worship, to language worship. I say this in some of my talks that, believe it or not, it's a bit savage, but even to this day, we're still language worshippers. We don't have a distance between our own conceptions and what is really here prior to a value experientially. So it's as if it's like if life is being authored, it's as if what is that page that it's being written on? And you realize that page is the here and now. The thing is, guys, I constantly think, like, you see, first my life, I would say, let me get a bit personal here. Life is ultimately an effort. And because time is kind of moving forward in our experience, this effort will unconsciously come about. But the advantage of the human position is that we can be conscious of this effort. What does that mean? That means imagine all the atoms in the cosmos are dancing. They are randomly dancing. They are moving. The poet Rumi said, "Where are these atoms dancing to?" You know, like he's like there is in some sense, I want to say, just speed of particles in space. And it's as if the access of the mind, the access of even us as human beings being saying and claiming we're conscious, it means we can give a direction to the speed. That means life is changing into a strange divine velocity, I find. And the divinity is just the trust in novelty, really. Because images are coming and going. So it's as if just like how many people, get on the subway, it's as if many ideas visit the person throughout the day. And if the person becomes sensitive, they say life sensitive. That means the person can see more than what their past and future self want. They will find the present to just be the world. So do you know that's the unique thing? The present moment doesn't have an image because it is dynamic. So it doesn't have a snapshot. So it doesn't feel to itself like it's in a photograph. So no belief could hold the eyes of the experiencer. And I thought that there is no longer time for war. In my writings, I'd spoken about a kind of humanity that, if imagine like an alien, in one of my science fiction works, I'd written like, imagine this alien, like evil alien civilization comes to, dominate Earth. And they come to Earth and they suddenly see there's no military, there's nothing, and people in Earth are just busy. And the alien civilization's like, don't these guys realize we're coming to destroy them? And he's like, they should. We kind of shot something at them. And they're like, suddenly this civilization on Earth, it's like they're just building, nonstop building. They're too busy to notice there's an evil advanced civilization about to come and take over. And then the evil advanced civilization is getting shocked to how oblivious the whole species, humanity, is. And so the evil alien species just says, hold on, guys, before we conquer them, the evil alien species goes to, like, finds a human being and he's like, hey, how come you guys aren't acknowledging us? And the human being looks at that evil, advanced, kind of like alien, thing, extraterrestrial civilization and says, hey, man, we're too busy. Come back another time. And the point was that we are so occupied with the glory of an efficient and advanced civilization that it's as if our fears do not disturb us. You know? It's like chaos even putting down its weapon to see how cool the world would look like. You see, the energy of human beings, it's an energy. Your attention is some sort of light in the room. Now, where is this energy being directed? And for most people, it tends to be directed into an individual life, into just they want their eyes to just get into heaven. That's it. And I think the greater joys of life begin when you realize there has always been more than your eyes in this world. And that's when the joy of service comes, as Rabindranath Tagore says, service to your species, to your civilization. And so Rabindranath Tagore says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I awoke and I saw that life was service. And then he says, I acted and behold, service was joy. Service was joy. And that's the superior gaze. That's pretty much the bodhisattva vibe. I find that trust the design of your moment and life is automatically fulfilled. That's something very crucial. Like the human being will come to many moments where obviously the human being can't have a value for. Like when you go into a new experience, like what can you do? You're just going through it. Imagine like, uh, when a person's like, bungee jumping, they can't like have a notebook and write comments on the experience. They're going through it. I feel that all knowledge is design in the void. And how this design moves is being observed in different ways and turned into linguistic patterns. And really, the study of language, believe it or not, is a study beyond chaos and order. It is a study beyond dualism. It is the reverse, like when you reverse engineer language, you go back into silence. When you reverse engineer movement, you go back into stillness. Do you know? But if you keep re-engineering it forward and updating it, both angles go to infinity. So I find it's as if the human psychology is actually oscillating between the infinite and the void. And so there are fragments of awareness that throughout the day take the sense of a sort of linearized time and self. I think it's all about like even any object you look at, you have owned in this life, anything, even stretching from your phone, stretching to your vehicle, stretching to anything you have had. You're going to see at some point it's like how you held it and how your mind held it. I have had objects where certain moments it's as if I could instantly let go. It's as if I had never touched the object. It's as if the abstract ownership of like there is for me. It's as if there was a time where I was really there was a complexity with how I would kind of experience objectivity and subjectivity. It's as if they were tangled. And then after some point, when I experienced certain intuitive moments of silence and incredible stillness, it's as if moments, when I say stillness, this is not a stillness, just physical stillness. This is a stillness of the narrative of your inner universe. And when you experience that stillness, it's a state of mind where all action is simultaneously just being a moment. And there is a chaos to it, but there's like, even chaos has beauty sometimes, but this is an inner chaos. It's not an outer chaos. It's the uniqueness of a poetry that cannot ignore the shadow of that the light is causing. So it's like we have this impression, just goodness, forget the bad. But if there was an extraterrestrial looking at it, it would just see various rooms of motivation. It would see how um, thought is a room. By the way, thanks for tuning in, guys. Feel free to um, I think I gotta make a term for it, but like question, challenge, say, share anything you want. It's like life is a moment that happens once. The freedom of the inner realms is more crucial always. It's like any external activity that I have come to do, I just know how the outcome is based on the trust I had before I did the activity. If there was a doubt, it was as if there was a hole in the ship, and so regardless of the direction the person would sail, it's as if there's a sort of angst, you know. I find that it's like eventually the subjective realm, you will see there are cycles in it too. And so of course, guys, when you hear me speak, I'm a person like, you see, I divide the world as that it's like the world is between users of technology, and there is the technology. And the world is divided between external technologies and inner technologies. Language, for example, is an inner technology. Spaceships, space stations in space are an outer technology. Do you see what I mean? So usually I'm commenting on inner technologies, and I find that we are reaching a point where we are seeing the unknown. And it's as if I find that if the educational system was a kingdom, it's as if one person is running to alert the authorities of the kingdom, the guards of the kingdom, where it's like an army is coming, war is coming. You know, if the educational system, what is that war? What is that army that is coming to combat man? It is the unknown as the forces of nature may intensify. And I find the greatest, how can I tell you? It's like great warriors is changing to great designers for a civilization that is more evolving into a mind projecting a body than a body projecting a mind. So, guys, my attention is on the chat section. Mick Takala says, "And is the inner order out of chaos?" Um, so, Mick, can you tell me? Can you tell me what you mean? What do you mean? What images are coming to your mind when you say inner order out of chaos? Oh, okay. I think I know what you're suggesting actually. What you're saying is the inner order out of chaos. So you mean that when a person sees chaos, imagine something chaotic happening in front of you, does that kind of bring forth the reverse, which is the inner order in the mind of man? You see, it depends on how you hold the duality in your experience. So there was a time where I was just trying to be a good boy, you know? And then there was a time where I did things bad and I went through I played the game of feeling like a bad person, you know? And then I eventually realized this can always change. And how do we even know? Even one action being done now, hundreds of years later, may totally be the right action. Do you know? So it's like when we realize, how can I say it? Language is many universes in one world. And so we have to acknowledge our multidimensionality. And the educational system will confront the unknown. It hasn't yet, but when it will sometime, I don't know, maybe, hopefully in my lifetime. It should be probably in my lifetime. But like, if it's, I call it the apocalypse of knowledge. We are going to realize we sparked language. We sparked language like apes, like fire, like the caveman discovered fire. We discovered symbol attribution and building our own world of values in a world that is too vast to be measured by any ruler. Rulers break in the face of infinity. And so that's the thing. I don't know what to say, but I feel we are going from a culture that thought of education as a sort of like, okay, I'm going to go to this, bookstore or this library or coffee shop and open this book and read it, to a search where the person, I'm telling you, when knowledge, I don't know, I think it's uncool and meaningless until there's a burning question inside about the true nature of what you're experiencing in the moment. Only that burning question will kind of pull you towards it. Do you know? And believe it or not, so much of what we think is happening, like the moment you realize you're not language, that means you have no psychology. It doesn't mean you don't have psychology. It just means you are not the images of your psyche. The psyche is designed to endlessly generate and fragment. Your psyche is trying to divide and conquer one moment. And it has to exist. It's an engine. It's like the heart of a dying star. There's a sort of nuclear, I don't know, what is it? Fission, fusion occur? Fusion, I think. You know? The Hermetic tradition has such a unique view that when I heard it, I was driving and I was like, holy shit. It's kind of like we are the viewer of chaos and order attributelessly. And everything that has an attribute suddenly falls into a spectrum. And so, really, how can we? It's like the most spiritual thing that I've seen scientists do is acknowledge the number zero, because it is there, but it has no value. And sometimes I find consciousness at its core, it's like the number zero. It's how the space is alive before the stuff in it. Yeah. So guys, I'll be back in a few minutes. Need a quick intermission. Okay, I'm back, guys. Let's continue. So just to catch up on the chat section. So Mick Takala in the chat section, I'm gonna kind of go one by one. You see, I am sharing something from my inner realms with you. That means I'm bringing an image into the outer realm, and then you from that outer realm re-evoke the image in your inner realms. That's communication, right? So what that means is that every person has to come into a sense of the dimensions that they are defining, that their own experience is held in. And that for most people comes within and without, because our eyes are focused outside, but because we have dream states where, like, whoa, my eyes were closed, but I saw something, you know? So in other words, I'm saying that the within and the without are a game of eons. It's like opposite sides attract, and it's like this kind of spinning wheel till the end of time. You know, things rise, things fall, things rise, things fall, civilizations rise, civilizations fall. And the cool thing is that when it comes to the human experience, it is the witness of its creation. Everything you have said and done in this life, you have been the eyes, the unknown eyes of divinity watching. And that's the recognition. I find that you see, you can't just use your inner realm as a bunker. I thought this you see, here's the different crossroad I walk compared to traditional spirituality. Traditional spirituality is like, all right, this world's messed up, illusion, let's get out of here. I'm saying that that's a cycle. The person will try to escape only to realize that is where he needed to be. I remember I created I animated this unique story that this man suddenly in his life at a very young age attains enlightenment, and then his head go above these clouds upon, imagine Mount Fuji or something, like they go towards the gods, and then suddenly the gods see the guy whose head has come to the heavenly dimension, and they're like, what are you doing here? You know, and the god's like, I made it to heaven, guys. You know, I made it. You know, and these guys are like, what are you doing? Go back, you have work to do. And that's what I mean. It is you are it's first, oh man, earth is messed up, I want to get out of here, kind of spirituality. Then it becomes, oh my god, earth is the only thing here, I have to be here mentality. You run towards the civilization that you ran away from. That's the mindset. That's where it's taking us. It is not taking us into a cave so we dissolve into the bliss of energetic light, and then forgetting that the civilization, it took 4 billion years to evolve with this mindset. It's like the evolutionary approach of the human being is something to value. The greatest resource we have is our minds. And the concept of meditation, I will tell you this, that there was a time I would meditate. You know, there was a time where there was so much tension built throughout the day that I just had to go in nature or go somewhere simple and just sit down. Like sit down on some stairs or somewhere. You know, just sit somewhere simple and just be a simple being. Like literally have no thought on anything and just exist and hear my own breath. Like many moments throughout the day I've had intensities where like the complexity was too much, and I just had to I would either risk overloading my mentality, and all those people who you can say their emotions make them act impulsive or like too much, that there's a trigger, there's a literally, like you can say 30 seconds before their burst of anger, there was a warning they didn't hear. You know, I don't want to say warning, but it's like you got to see, it's like emotions rise when images change before you're ready in your subjective realms. This is why people get angry on a realistic level. What is language? It's just sound. How can sound hurt a person? But it is the images that sound changes behind the eyes of people that is kind of like the emotional sorrow, isn't it? Mick, I'll tell you this, that they asked you, Ramana Maharshi, what is meditation? He said meditation is your true nature. And the person was like, what? The person was like, meditation, Ramana Maharshi said meditation is your true nature. You know what that means? That means all you need is to just go towards a simpler version of yourself that trusted the world. And then you won't believe how many things that you know will suddenly be given a gentle allowance to move, you know? Uh, so Mick, I am on the opposite side of what you say there, where you remember everything is just a thought. I am saying you're not a thought. I am saying thoughts are the indirect mask for a direct experience. The direct experience is it's like it's the instantaneity of energy aware of itself. That's not a thought. Thoughts are anytime the person moves or makes sound, they emerge. If you sometimes I tried this out. This is an exercise I developed to kind of I don't know. It's still a questionable theory I have. I'm still looking into it, but I kind of had this moment where I sat down, cross-legged and in a silent room, and I said a sentence, and then I said it in a lower tone, and then I said it in a lower tone, and then I said it, and then I reached a point where I was saying the sentence in with such a low volume that I couldn't tell if my voice box was moving or if I was thinking. And that's when I realized a lot of our subjectivity is interlinked with our biology. Do you know? That means a lot of people's thoughts is their voice box micro moving. This is a strange thing that when you this is why when they hold the throat, the person also snaps out a thought. Do you know? This is why we wear scarves. I think in the future, scarves, like if in a science fiction reality, scarves would be like any person other than you touches the scarf, their hand will like burn. Yeah. you know, thought is a projection in the moment. It's a content, part of the content of your moment of being, but it is not um, you. It can't be you because it dies in front of you and you have new thoughts. Oh man. All right, guys, I'm stalling here. I gotta get to the title. Great designers of a conscious civilization. I here on paper I kind of wrote. I divided into three steps of kind of explaining this. First, I gotta tell you, great designers. I'll leave that for last. I mean, I've explained it to some degree till now, but the conscious part of the title is referring to individual consciousness, the responsibility of individuals to become conscious of their world, and efforts to be made of unraveling or making conscious the unconscious. That means the purpose of life is to see what it is by living it. And so the civilization, the idea of a civilization, I have sat down. I remember once I had a dream that inspired me to write this book, which is it's still in one of my drawers. It's called Highway of the Stars. And I remember I had this dream where literally I was looking at a night sky like you would look at night like the night sky, but I was seeing, you know how you see like stars at night? I was seeing like this row of stars moving. And then in the dream, I had a semi closer gaze, and then I realized they were not stars. But when they were moving in our atmosphere, it seemed like stars were moving in the sky. So imagine children, or looking at night at the sky and seeing stars moving, and noticing a highway of stars has developed. So it was this strange geometrical book I wrote. This was 2012, I think, or 13, somewhere then. You see, um, I don't know. Pretty much we need an army of designers to build Civilization 2.0, which is a yin-yang civilization where it is acknowledging the potential of every human being to be chaotic or to be go towards the order. But when we realize we have inner dimensions, the task of the human being is to externalize chaos. So what that means is we want to take the chaos of the world and extinguish that flame internally. What that means is when two people are in, person A and person B are in an angry fight, one person has to cut the fight. And like there be like cut. And what that means is one person has to take the anger and internally diffuse it. And so that's what I mean by the conscious part of civilization. Carl Jung, like an army general, shouted at the future generations, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And the effort of 8 billion creatures on a rock must be to open their eyes to such a degree that in their peripheral vision they see each other's sight. So for me, I was like, wait a minute, if matter is evolved thought, what is thought evolving to? And I realize it is evolving into the collective administration of matter. It is the infusion of the experiencer. We are moving towards a time where it's going to be strangely have imagined the first time. What would you call it? Transhumanism. I just imagine a day where many strange entities are walking the surface of this earth. You know, on that day, man is not alone in its ownership, and every mind brings with itself a way it lifts up the dust of the stardust of the cosmos into a character in a story. The attention to design is key. Okay, you know, I had to share more my experience as a designer, and I will tell you this, that for me, life design is divine. And what I mean by that is before I was a creature that had emotions, before I was I had opened my eyes in personhood, it was a world of shape. It was a world of color, and it was in a world where awareness was being. And so, really, what it is that we are all being the presence of all that we are aware of. That's the whole point of being, you know. But when we do things, the attention narrows. So, it's like when we act, our view on our consciousness is zoomed in, you know, zoomed into matter. The moment we stop moving, it is as if the mind is singing its sermon, silent sermon. I think it's a transformation of individual consciousness into a field. We're pretty much a leaf on a river that right now we think the river is the imagination of the leaf, only to discover that no, the leaf is being moved by the river. And the whole meaning of order is that there was chaos, that there was randomity, and then there was a selection of this randomity and the beginning of the first reference point. So this is when a person has to learn to honor how they chose to be a being in this life. So it means you don't have to just observe others. You have to understand that you are some intelligence here, and nobody has your DNA, and nobody has your eyes, and it is only the opportunity of a lifetime to see what was behind your eyes. The mind for me is ultimately it's a direction of energy. And what is energy? Just potential. That means right now, before I speak, my inner realms are moving. What I mean by that is every time you close your eyes, you see your inner realms moving. And when I say see, you don't see like the way with your eyes, you see it as just abstraction. That means if somebody told you to visualize something, where that visualization is your inner realms, is your subjective realms. And as you pay attention to it, you'll notice the speed of how phenomenology comes and goes. And pretty much, believe it or not, we die so many times in our mind throughout the day by simply changing location, by changing mood, by changing atmosphere, by going through various states. Let's consider that human beings, their intelligence is a data processor, is processing data, the mind or the brain. Now, this data that is being processed, if we think that right now the speed that it's being processed is the current civilization, and if we were to think of an advanced civilization, it would mean an acceleration in the speed of the acknowledgement of phenomena. So, what does that mean? That means we can't have the external world advancing technologically without the users of technology also having more expansive scope. And this is the dangers of when one man makes a technology where others are not the creator of. They begin to realize that it's like mysterious consequences because the cause is hidden. And so life is really an effort to recognize that your life is how knowledge is being born in every moment of the unknown. There's a unique glory there. I don't know how to say it. Some sort of presence of vision is its own bliss. The fact that there is something here to be aware of, to look at. Sometimes I've had moments where very chaotic things, no, I don't want to say chaotic, but like certain things have happened that my self-worth have diminished, has diminished into literally close to a breaking point. And when that self-worth is diminished, there has always been the comfort of kind of realizing when everything breaks, the only thing that seems to endure is the mind. So the failure is not failure as long as the witness can move forth. In 2015 I started drawing randomly. I was looking outside a window. I was bored. I picked up a pen. There was some sort of like ruler there, and this is something I drew. I called this Trinfinatum. I drew this in 2015, I think. And so my experience of design, I can say it's just strangely certain moments where it's like a chef that makes a cake and then puts it in the oven and then takes it out. And when you're making it, you can't really judge it. Only after a sort of unique energetic process and creativity, if we take into this idea that when we look at creation, it's as if the man and the woman come together. And as they kind of unite, there is the birth of the new. And so I find that same relationship happens with different people, and the kind of, you can say, archetypal program of design they have, you know. So what it was like was me picking up a pen, looking at a piece of paper, having no thought on what to draw, and then as my hand moved, it was as if, like, you don't think about your heartbeat, it's happening. You don't think about your breathing, it's happening. Then a lot of innovative things, the person, once they have the same trust as they have with their heart, which is so instantaneous in their knowing, when you have that same instantaneous knowing, then it's like anywhere your attention goes, the mind is, it's like the moment you acknowledge your mind, it becomes your servant. The moment you don't, it's trying to own you. And when I say what your mind is simply how alive the world is. Every phenomena is a reflection of how your experiences are being the value, how we are coloring in meaning over phenomena that, believe it or not, on some empirical level is meaningless. Sam Harris, I remember he was kind of asked about, some stuff similar to this, and he was like, when I look at my daughter, I don't see like, oh, look at all those neurons leading to that cuteness. And that's the point, that the dimension of the vitality of life is not one that is reduced to pure empiricism, to a pure scientific method. It's as if I understand the mighty endeavor of science, but I also realize that there have been many giants that have walked blind on the surface of this earth. And so the responsibility of the human being must be an attendance to emotional stability, because I realize, let me tell you why this is a good argument to be compassionate to every human being you see. Because subconsciously they are reacting to the void, they are reacting to emptiness. Every one of us are. And when we are comfortable, when we realize, okay, what can I do? It's all hovering in space. It's like you dance at most. Um, by the way, guys, I probably should make this announcement that I've set up on Patreon this. I mean, it's how can I tell you? It's like I had this kind of Facebook group called School of Athens. Then I realized Facebook groups can get kind of hacked. So I thought of kind of like um, using Patreon and then kind of focusing on sharing a lot of content that I like, various videos I see throughout the day or useful content. I just thought of making this kind of river of informational kind of content in that community. And kind of the School of Athens idea was like School of Athens was a place where minds from around the world would come, and there was a kind of a peaceful gladiator arena of subjective challenging. So I wanted to kind of create that community on Patreon. So if you feel you would like to support that, the link's been shared. But anyways, let's continue with this topic. The only thing I find that separates those who think they are creative and those who are not is that the creative somehow they know they trust the unknown, where novelty is born out of. When you trust the unknown, various gifts of the mind are revealed to you, because that's when you don't constantly try to put life into a linearized meaning. It's too dynamic. It's kind of too alive. It's like, trying to explain a horse, but it's like horse riding, from reading a Wikipedia article and never being on horse riding. It's like the horse is a living being, and the relationship in that moment suddenly comes to moment to moment. So when it comes to human communication, I don't really think you can really plan it. You have to kind of be attentive to how the tension's moving. But inevitably, every person has access through their perception to some design, right? That means it's like, what is creativity? We can say it's kind of like neurons running around town. Various ways that the moment can be approached. When there's this freedom of, like, you kind of see it like when you see an object, like right now there's a coffee mug in front of me. This coffee mug is an object that I could literally look from different angles. Literally, if I wanted to, I could have a 360 view of this object. So then the thought comes, why can I not have a 360 view of a subject? And when I challenged that mindset, I came to realize there's much more than just seeing a thought. There's much more than just thinking you're a thought. There's much more than everything known in language. And what is that is more? It is the remembrance of collective rhythms. It's as if like the universal sector is remembering itself through human life, and that's the efforts of the emergence and the merging of conscious universes. It's as if it's like, what it's like. It's like a bunch of like people running with like torches in their hand at night, and they're all seeing each other, only the flames of the torches, and all. If this was a movie, we'd be seeing from an aerial view these lights in the darkness just running towards each other, and then as they unite, the lights increase, and that increasing of the light of what we know as a species must be the priority. That means the true educational system is it should be strict, but not in the way we see now. It should be strict in the sense that, oh, child of humanity, you have opened your eyes once. Run and explore the world that is here. It is so vast and unknown that what do you want your teachers to tell you? It is unknown. Do you see? And it is that is the scholar's honor. There is a value to pulling that curtain of subjective limitation to see how else efficiently the objectivity can move. We are all pilots of an attention that awakens. It's as if on some level you can even not see the concept of birth and death, because individual consciousness, you awaken to it. If you notice, you awaken to it. That means the child has a lot of memories. A child has a lot of memories, but it's what do psychologists say? It's like until the child is 12 or 14, that's when it starts noticing it's an individual and it needs to be responsible for. So that means all 12-year-old children must recognize they're individuals. If they have not, it's like somebody slapped the educational system in the face. I'm joking. It's like that. We don't want that. But you know what I mean? Like, education is so valuable that it should become like literally like the same enthusiasm as, imagine 400 years from now, a person coming and saying, all right, we need pilots for interstellar travel. Imagine scouting for pilots for interstellar travel. You'd be like, whoa, I can drive this, spaceship at hyper speed. You'd run towards that, you know. And now we have to see the same importance in humanity. Children must want real. I realize a unique thing. Sometimes efficiency, the genius thing about it is sometimes, let me tell you, some problems can have incredibly simple solutions by just turning one simple thing, one simple part of the problem. If it changes, can change the nature of the whole problem and potentially lead to discoveries beyond the answer. So that means we need people asking questions about questions. You see, we need a kind an ontological renaissance, recalibrated by direct experience. And so that's what I hope to see, that the great designers, every being realizes their DNA is a unique design. So you must establish yourself as a being who has access to your own eyes, and only you will know what you can do for your world. And trust is the greatest signal. Trust is the, kind of like that moment where, Houston, we're coming home. How does the world move? In changing eyes. In ancient cultures, they would say the breath links heaven and earth. The breath is pure, is honestly, for me, it's like sometimes more better than any sort of temple or shrine or archetype or image or language. Sometimes just the simplicity of just hearing your breath happen alongside a vast cosmos. Realizing you are a fragment of a cosmic magnitude. Like, it's kind of surreal. I feel that's what's happening. It's like we looked at reality to the degree it's becoming surreality. A reality so surreal that we can't separate the surreal and the real anymore. And that's advancement, and that's evolution, and there will be sacrifices. And these sacrifices, I hope that there are shields, hopefully uh, I would be able to set some backup systems in motion. But I think the issue is that as the external environment becomes more technological, people's attention will care less about being biological. And that's why I thought the only backup system, or a major way we can make sure we never lose sight of our biological natural existence, is by somehow having all the scholars in the world, all human beings can contribute to this massive project in trying to somehow every branch of knowledge, every concept being taught anywhere in any educational system can be seen in the biological human body. I think that it's like we're reaching a point that the educational system all around the world must care about first raising the child like a doctor. Do you know? No, and it doesn't mean like, I don't mean it forceful. I just mean that it's like we must. It's like, imagine a child. The teacher wants to explain, for example, some concept, and the teacher can explain how the hand is and explain totally that concept. Like I feel like the blueprints of knowledge should be designed in the reflection of the biological human body. That's one backup system. That means even when we look at our knowledge, it's pointing towards the human biology being preserved. And of course, we can't ignore technology. I mean, what is it? A technology is like a tattoo that is controlling your body. It's kind of like wondering, like, if one could ask a question from the mind, if the mind could somehow respond, one would ask, like, why are you here? And when one kind of looks at why the mind is here, either there needs to be some narrative or explanatory value, or it is an empty page where the truth must be created. That means a lot of people on this planet, because they are overreacting to emptiness, they want to find truth instantly out of fear, not realizing that reality, once free will is taken full responsibility for, has to be a conscious creation. And what is creation? It is the awareness of movement of various designs and eventually how they reappear. The same way you kind of sleep and wake up and you experience new days with new senses of self. Similarly, it's like all those senses of self, once they look at any sort of ideological pattern, they are a new dimension of it. So what I mean by that is, when I came to kind of look at how articulation is happening, how is the mind engineering language as itself, I came to see that it's as if first there's a direct sensory experience that can't be avoided. So if your eyes are open, it's as if the world is given imagination. It's like the person who went to study imagination noticed that. And then suddenly he's, oh, oh, okay, so if the world is given imagination, what is imagination? So imagination becomes how the objective world that can move. That means if I look at this cup in my hand right now, and I suddenly imagine I move my hand and the cup is still hovering there, that imagination, the reason it's like, because there's an immediate thing to look at as the reference, anything else becomes imagination. So what does that mean? That means we have built a society that thinks anything other than what it sees in the moment is imagination, therefore it doesn't have tangible value. But I'm telling you, it does. It doesn't mean it's real. It doesn't mean just because a person had a dream that they were in another star system, it doesn't mean that they are. You know, it just means that the attention is attempting, and every phenomena is like how the mind is moving. So on some level, whether it's a chaotic experience or an ordered experience, the person is like, ah, something is moving. You know, it's like that's the ultimate silliness of life. That at the end of the day, it's just phenomenon moving, regardless of how much you paint a being as chaotic or ordered. It's just how a universe is this grand melody where we are like this conscious instrumentation of So this is what I would recommend. This is what I experienced. It makes sense to talk about it. Um, I think inspiration comes in rhythms, and its inspiration is ultimately not and based on an external thing. It's when importance, what is important for you, shifts. So I've had moments where what I've considered to be a thought that I had to write down was a certain way the way I was looking at my moment changed, that the importance value of it was different. So that's why it became important. And I remember I like my whole life, it's been a kind of like struggle of performing with the outer realm, and a sort of wondering about what the inner realm is. And eventually, throughout the whole journey, the person will eventually become acquainted with their presence. The moment you notice that consciousness is not bound to the objective and the subjective realm, the observer of the moment is an unspeakable movement. So, what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, when we think about intelligence, it's either static or it's moving. So, I'm telling you, like, this is the hilarious thing about reality. Either it's all knowledge is stillness and movement. And when you begin discovering that in your own experience, then your own realm begins to crystallize, and then ideologies pour out of your mind. Because something important enough and real enough has inspired you. And it doesn't mean what the person perceives from their subjective realms is reality, but it is definitely inspired by reality. You know, it's like the same way human beings are wondering about, are trying to survive, to continue. It's as if language and ideology needs human attention to survive. You know, certain ideas, they have to be recommunicated or they are lost. They're not even lost in translation, they're lost before translation. Anything you don't care about in your life leaves you to some degree. But it is again also how much the person is thinking that life, the values they see in life, is only one-sided. It's kind of realizing every person's face you have seen has been a face administered by a faceless mind. And that faceless mind is an accumulation of momentum based on what the person has experienced. And so it is the challenge. It is really the challenge of mastery, that as man went to attain the highest skill, he at some point noticed that could he be not allowing nature's pace to go on. That's definitely, I can say, a sort of struggle that the inner innovator goes through, the inner designer. So what does that mean? That means it's like one part is getting the design and creating the thing. The other thing is how to share the thing, you know? Or like getting an idea and then writing it down on a piece of paper, or seeing an image and then trying to communicate that on the empty page. Ultimately, any sort of thing that the person wants to update, your attention has to evoke experience. That means it's like most people, they go try something, then it upsets them, then they don't try it again. But the thing is, if you continue, if you dare attempt mastery, some doors may suddenly open. And the gods will look at a feeble creature trying to reach the higher mountains, and they will say, look at this little guy trying to be as big as the cosmos. But the effort and its continuity has a rawness where there is an innocence to that which doesn't know. And I feel that we are like, I remember saying it in one of my talks, that it's like the species is at an 8-year-old level. If extraterrestrials see us, we may think like, "Yo, look at our nuclear weapons. We're so advanced." But I think we are displaying 8-year-old civilization intelligence. And to advance, that means, you know how an advanced civilization would be? A civilization that found a resolution to inefficient violence by evoking a value for the mind. That means, imagine the person, rather than their attention justifying their weakness, the same attention the person realizes can be on their strength. It's as if, why is it that in Zen they say to climb a mountain, start at the top? Because, some people are on earth and they're trying to get to heaven, and some people are realize earth is in heaven. Earth is in the heavens. It has always been. There is what I mean by that is like freedom means an ability to put into motion any design. Wisdom means you looked at the world before you set the design into motion. And what is it, It's like, what is it that human beings really fear? I think ultimately it's the fear that who they really were is being missed out by their civilization. And the more dishonest civilization becomes, I feel it's the more the human being feels that it's like honesty has no value. And when honesty has no value, the cruel um, uh, suffer blindly. What I mean by that is the most evil person, after they're successful, they will realize they denied they denied the evolution of the civilization, and that is the greatest sin. That is the greatest sin, when a better way that civilization can be and it's not happening. That's the only sin one should entertain. It doesn't matter if you're looking at the word sin as a religious follower or as a mathematician. Language is hollow, we put in the meaning. The same way Buddha said, he said, when you look at an object, it's like before you looked at it, that object had no symbol. Like it's like when my attention goes on the object, it's a cup. When my attention is not on the object, it's just an object. It's an undefinable just landscape, just thing. And so that's the cool thing, that when we look at others, they appear as an object, but when we look at ourselves, we appear as a subject. What does that mean? That means what you really are is an unknown, abstract, changing abstraction, but what others are a solid material frame. So what you see what I mean? That's the cool thing. That's the mystery. The mystery of subjects hovering in the air and we believing in stories. And so I don't know. I don't know what it is. It's easy not to care. It's like it's very easy. If they say it, it's always easier to break something than build it. But why build it? And that was my greatest challenge. Why care for emptiness? And only through the vision of the designer, of the artist, of the writer, I realized, okay, there's a point, that we can create the points on the map, that we can structure the blueprints of a better civilization. So imagine 8 billion designers got into one room of mind and they were like, all right, even we had AI in the room. And we thought of all the ways that civilization could be. And you know what I would say? What I think the best civilization would be? I think we have to immediately build sky cities and start living in the sky and completely get rid of all infrastructure on Earth and let Earth become a natural heaven, you know? And then we have visitations to Earth from the orbit. I think that's the solution. That literally stop. It's not that we stop building civilization. We just build our civilization on the orbit, so the surface of the Earth can heal. You know, because the issue is man has an unnatural mind in a natural world, and the consequences of an unnatural mind in a natural world is literally we're tainting the waters of nature. And so that's why I'm saying to kind of live in the atmosphere would be, I think, the best solution for human beings. I think pretty much we have to design sky cities so we can let the earth heal and, we enjoy the view. Oh man, I am so behind in sharing so many stuff I've written with the public that it's like after some point I feel like, I might need, I might need to invent a robot to help me, Uh, thank God though there is um, a technology that doesn't believe in God that evolved. I am telling you, it's like when you suddenly see language is a mask upon the world, then you wonder about its true face. And it's strange, but there is an atmosphere of pure witnessing before thought emerges. And I don't know what else could be a better sieve of filtering sensory perception into clarity than honesty. Honesty means action before inaction, means abidance before direction. So, what it is this, guys. Externally, sensory wise, 8 billion creatures on a rock. But when we take into consideration the mystery of the conscious mind, my suggestion, Mr. Within suggestion, is that it is a field. And if there is a chance, if there's 0.001%, whatever amount of zeros you want, 1% chance that our minds at their core are the same, it may suggest that energetically we are not different. But how this energy applies is the permission we grant. So it's like we have to master individual life, then master collective life, then become a universal witness. That what that means is it's the evolution of the archetype into the ever presence of an infinite continuum. And when I say continuum, not non-image continuum, what does that mean? That means usually, like when you think about what an infinite continuum would be, it would be as if like something is moving through a space-time continuum at such a speed that it is appearing as infinite. It is moving at a speed that one can't tell, and it's as if like I don't know what it is, but the mind is at moving at a faster speed. It's like anytime you want to increase the speed of life, just start observing it. Because it's kind of interesting that every day there is something different, and that difference is the novelty bringer. Sometimes I've thought, could it be that how the karma of the day appears is based on how I open my eyes to the day? And again, the importance of climbing the mountain by starting at the top. That you see that in every moment of your life, if you were beyond language, that means your attention could be on any language. That means if we really took the nature of the mind as a position, it would mean there's a way to identify with thought without a body. And I find that that's when the study of dimensions is required. And because we're 8 billion people and every person has a different DNA, ultimately what that is implying is that we are not meant to build a civilization that entertains one dimension. We have to build a multidimensional conscious civilization. That means a civilization that somehow has found a way to be conscious of all the way the institutions are happening. Because I found it interesting, even in business and economics, they call a business an entity, a business entity, you know. And when you look at an entity, it tends to be something that is alive and something that is connected. As if like if you took bacteria as an entity, as if bacteria in the stomach, which is, for example, or how would I say it, or like how the acid in the stomach it's like I don't know, digests food and kind of gets rid of whatever you eat to some level. Um, I'm just trying to suggest that it's an intelligence that is finding itself within a greater intelligence. So it's as if like me and you suddenly realizing we are the blood cells in the vein of the cosmos. So do you see what that means? That means like regardless of all our ideology, there is a rhythm of livelihood present. It's like the symphony of life, and those who hear it cannot die. You know, poetically speaking. Sorry, guys, I needed a quick intermission there. Jonathan Swift has this quote. He says, "Vision is the art of seeing that which is invisible to others." So he says, so he says, vision is the art of seeing that which is invisible to others. Jonathan Swift says this, and then Michelangelo, he says, "I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free." And the way Michelangelo set that angel, saw that angel in the stone and set it free means it. Imagine you're a child born 200 years from now, and when you open the door, you see a civilization that is inspired by the honor of its skill. That means right now, people in the world and in the media and everywhere, there is a focus on what kind of object is there, what kind of subject is there. But it is, I think, what is more superior is the value of how experience kind of endures in space and time. So I kind of feel every person is handling their inner realms to some degree. They are getting certain experiences, but it's like a lot of what we as an individual learn from the world, it remains dormant and we don't communicate it. It's like to be able to design something, you have to be conscious of the space where you're designing it. And you can say your past is the space where the future is built by the hands of the present. In other ideology, language, it can move in many ways. There's something in these episodes, guys, that I call it like a quote tunnel. Pretty much, I find a theme or a person in history, and I kind of read all the quotes on, like, I don't know, one web page, you know. And so the theme is design. So I'll read for you. So we'll dive into the quote tunnel. Paul Rand, says design is the method of putting form and content together. Design, just as art, has multiple definitions. There is no single definition. Design can be art. Design can be aesthetics. Design is so simple that that's why it is so complicated. Steve Jobs says design is a funny word. Some people think design means how it looks. But of course, if you dig deeper, it's really how it works. And that's a cool idea if we take that on a psychological level, that how people look is not how deep down the way who how they are working as a person. I feel most people kind of the I don't know. There's people have different intensities of trust of their moment. Walt Disney says you can design and create and build the most wonderful place in the world, but it takes people to make the dream a reality. And trust me, that an advanced civilization takes 8 billion or more. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry says a designer knows he has achieved perfection not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. Charles Eames says, to whom does design address itself? To the greatest number, to the specialist of an enlightened matter. To a privileged social class, design addresses itself to the need. And that's an incredible question, that we design when we have a need to design. We live when there is a need. It's like when life, it's like there was a need to see an angel in order for the man to sculpt like a statue of an angel from stone. There was a need to see a vision there in order to do something about it. Robert Frost says the artist in me cries out for design. Coco Chanel says fashion fades, only style remains the same. Charles Eames says eventually everything connects. People, ideas, objects. The quality of the connections is the key to quality per se. Steve Jobs says design is not just what it looks like and feels like, design is how it works. Coco Chanel says fashion is architecture, it is a matter of proportions. William Butler Yeats says designs in connection with postage stamps and coinage may be described. Think as the silent ambassadors on national taste. Okay. Elon Musk says any product that needs a manual to work is broken. Frank Lloyd Wright says the space within becomes the reality of the building. Samuel Johnson says many things difficult to design prove easy to performance. Irma Bombeck says sometimes I can't figure designers out. It's as if they flunked human anatomy. Frank Lloyd Wright says space is the breath of art. Wow, what a statement. Space is the breath of art. Space is the breath of art. That means just like we need air to breathe to be able to do something, art needs the freedom to happen, First, Miguel de Cervantes says delay always breeds danger, and to protract a great design is often to ruin it. Herodotus, he says some men give up their designs when they have almost reached the goal, while others, on the contrary, obtain a victory by exerting at the last moment more vigorous efforts than ever before. Tom Peters says design is so critical it should be on the agenda of every meeting in every single department. Christian Louboutin says, I'm a designer. I think if you work in fashion, you have to give people fantasy. Okay. Tom Peters says design is so critical it should be on the... Oh, I read that. Henry Matisse says it is only after years of preparation that the young artist should touch color, Not color used descriptively, that is, but as a means of personal expression. George Santayana says graphic design is the paradise of individuality, eccentricity, heresy, abnormality, hobbies, and humors. Louis Kahn says design is not making beauty. Beauty emerges from selection, affinities, integration, love. Thomas J. Watson says design must reflect the practical and aesthetic in business, but above all, good design must primarily serve people. And that's a good, interesting idea, guys. That when we think about design, of course, we can think about the consequences of design. And human beings are building AI in an advanced technological future, like we're running that way as a civilization. So that means we're going to be designing the future that may in the future potentially design us. Fascinating idea, no? That we are designing a world that will redesign us. So we got to be careful about technology, you know. Alexander McQueen says clothes and jewelry startling individual. When you see a woman in my clothes, you want to know more about them. To me, that is distinguishes good designers from bad designers. Okay, the search results have brought design from everywhere. Gianni Versace. I like the body. I like the design. Everything to do with the body. Okay. Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. Let's see more philosophers, hopefully. A chair is a very difficult object. A skyscraper is almost easier. That is why Chippendale is famous. I'm a stranger to the realms of these quotes. Steve Wozniak says, in the end, I hope there's a little note somewhere that says I designed a good computer. Charles Eames says recognizing the need is the primary condition for design. Ralph Lauren says I design clothes, I design dreams. Branch Rickey says luck is the residue of design. I like that actually. Jonathan Ive says it's a very strange thing for a designer to say, but one of the things that really irritates me in products is when I'm aware of designers wagging their tails in my face. Here, let me see. Buckminster Fuller has some nice quotes about this. Here, this is the quote I definitely want the audience to hear. Buckminster Fuller, he was like this next level American designer, and he is, I consider, by far one of the greater designers of humanity. What that means is he cared to look at things with a precision that inevitably led to innovation and invention. He says you never change things. This is Buckminster Fuller. He says you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Buckminster Fuller says, everyone is born a genius, but the process of living degeniuses them. He says love is metaphysical gravity. He says, don't fight forces, use them. Buckminster Fuller says, either war is obsolete or men are. He says, there's nothing in a caterpillar that tells you it's going to be a butterfly. He says, we are called to be the architects of the future, not its victims. Exactly. That sentence embodies the inspiration for this talk. Fuller says, when I am working on a problem, I never think about beauty, but when I have finished, if the solution is not beautiful, I know it's wrong. Incredible. So anyways, guys, pretty much I hope every person hearing this, even, you care, that you become conscious of the design of your moment, the design of your experience. Pretty much all the mystical traditions were like, study yourself and you'll realize that your attention is the ultimate secret of how the universe is here. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in, and may the era of a conscious civilization be ushered in by great designers. I think designers are they are the hope when all other paths have become hopeless. It is only the designer's will, where it's like the reevoking of the new, So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful. Much blessings, and namaste.